I never imagined that the most humiliating moment of my life would begin with the tinkling of crystal glasses and the sweet, cloying scent of vanilla candles. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28 years old, and I've spent most of my adulthood trying to pretend my mother didn't still control every aspect of my life. But that night, in the sprawling living room of her immaculate New England house, with 50 of her closest friends gathered to celebrate her charity success, it became painfully clear how wrong I'd been. I stood near the fireplace, clutching my glass of champagne so hard my knuckles whitened. My reflection in the beveled mirror above the mantel looked foreign to me. A woman in a deep emerald dress, hair swept into a chignon so tight it made my temples throb. But behind the carefully curated appearance, my stomach twisted with something I hadn't been able to name until that evening: dread. The party was exactly what you'd expect from Meredith Carter. My mother always knew how to dazzle a crowd. Gold-rimmed plates glimmered under the chandelier. Waiters in crisp white shirts offered platters of shrimp cocktail and miniature quiches. Every conversation seemed carefully orchestrated to showcase her accomplishments. And I, her only daughter, was nothing more than another of her well-placed props. I tried to focus on the mundane chatter around me. Heather, my childhood friend who had drifted away after college, was giggling with two of Mom's bridge club cronies. Robert, my mother's lawyer and longtime admirer, stood with a scotch in hand, telling some story about real estate investments. Everyone was here to adore her, to applaud her. And I was here because I was expected to be, like always. I told myself I could survive one more evening of polite smiles and hollow congratulations. But the uneasy feeling kept blooming in my chest, impossible to ignore. It was in the way Mom's eyes flicked over to me, assessing, calculating. The way she smiled when she caught me watching her, like she knew something I didn't. I was trying to decide whether to slip out back for a breath of fresh air when my mother's voice rang out above the crowd. "Everyone, may I have your attention for a moment?" The room fell quiet. I felt 50 pairs of eyes shift toward us. My mother stood near the piano, her arm draped around me in a practiced gesture of maternal affection. "I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for being here," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "As you know, this charity gala is very dear to me. But tonight, I also want to share something personal about my beautiful daughter, Emily." My stomach dropped. She hadn't told me she planned to talk about me. "She's had a challenging few years," my mother continued, giving my shoulder a squeeze that felt like a threat. "But I'm so proud that she's finally finding her way. She's still figuring it out, bless her heart." Laughter rippled through the guests. A hot flush rose up my neck. Mom glanced at me, smiling that tight-lipped smile she reserved for moments she knew she'd won. "I've always said that some people take a little longer to grow up. And Emily has such potential. I'm sure she'll find something she's passionate about eventually." The words hit me like a slap. My mother knew exactly how to dress an insult in the guise of a compliment. It was her specialty, humiliation as an art form. I tried to step back, but her arm tightened around me. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure everyone could hear it. "She's living with me for now, of course," she added breezily. "But we're hopeful she'll get back on her feet soon. Aren't we, sweetheart?" I couldn't speak. My mouth went dry. The guests laughed politely, their eyes darting away from my face. In that moment, I felt like I was 5 years old again, standing in the middle of our kitchen while she told my father I was too sensitive to handle real life. That same sickly, powerless feeling returned, heavier than ever. I looked at the faces around me, some pitying, some amused, all complicit. The moment passed, and the guests turned their attention to the pianist, who began to play a light jazz melody as if nothing had happened. But I stood frozen, the blood roaring in my ears. Mom finally released me, patting my cheek as if I were a toddler who needed soothing. "Go on, dear. Enjoy yourself." I set my glass down and slipped through the French doors onto the back patio. The night air hit me like a slap, cool and merciless. I gripped the railing, trying to breathe. My heart was still hammering. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But all I could do was stand there, trembling. As I stared out into the darkness, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was just another of Mom's little performances, that I was imagining the malice behind her words. But deep down, I knew better. I replayed her smile in my mind, the way she looked at me, like she owned me, body and soul, like she knew she could say or do anything, and I'd never fight back. For the first time in years, I felt something break loose inside me. A quiet, seething rage. I turned back toward the house. Through the glass, I could see her laughing with Robert, basking in her triumph. A thought came to me clear and cold. She thinks she can humiliate me forever. I clenched my jaw. Maybe she could. Maybe that was my destiny, to be her perpetual failure. But as I watched her, a memory stirred. Something I'd found months ago, buried in the back of her desk drawer. A stack of papers she thought I'd never see. My pulse quickened. She had her secrets, too. I wasn't sure what I would do with them yet. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I held something she couldn't take away. Inside the house, she lifted her glass in a silent toast to her guests, to her power, to my humiliation. I forced myself to smile. Enjoy it while you can, mother. Because something unfinished had started that night. And I wasn't going to let it end. I didn't go back inside the house right away. Instead, I lingered on the patio, the night pressing down around me like a dark secret of its own. The hum of conversation drifted through the French doors, but I couldn't bring myself to rejoin them. I kept replaying my mother's voice, so calm, so casual, as if she hadn't just reduced me to a punchline in front of 50 people. My throat burned with humiliation, but beneath it, something sharper had begun to take hold, suspicion. I thought about those papers I'd found in her desk. The ones she'd hidden under a false bottom in the drawer, where she probably assumed I'd never look. At the time, I'd told myself they were none of my business. Just some old financial records, maybe a will she hadn't told me about. But now, standing alone in the dark, I started to wonder if they were something else entirely. A gust of wind lifted the edge of the tablecloth beside me. The fabric fluttered like a warning. I drew in a shaky breath and tried to gather my thoughts. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to storm back into the house, shove those papers in her face, and demand answers. But another part of me knew that would only give her more power. She would turn it around on me just like she always did. "You're overreacting, Emily. You're imagining things again. Why must you always be so dramatic?" Her voice was already in my head, rehearsing all the ways she would make me doubt myself.
No.
If I was going to do this, I needed proof. And I needed to be certain of what I was accusing her of. I pulled my phone from my clutch and scrolled through my messages, hoping for a distraction. But the last person I'd texted was Heather, weeks ago. We hadn't spoken much since she drifted into my mother's social circle. And tonight, she'd barely looked at me. I thought of Heather's uneasy smile when Mom was telling her little story about my potential. It wasn't quite pity. It was something closer to guilt. As I watched through the glass doors, Heather glanced over her shoulder, as if she felt my gaze. Our eyes met for a moment before she quickly turned away. The muscles in my jaw tightened. I went back inside, sliding into the crowd as quietly as I could. No one noticed me. They were too busy listening to my mother hold court at the piano, basking in their admiration. I slipped past them and down the hall toward my mother's office. I knew she'd never leave her guests long enough to catch me there. And if I could just look at those papers again, maybe I'd find something that explained why she needed to humiliate me so publicly. The door to her office was closed, but not locked. I eased it open and slipped inside. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. My mother's trophies, plaques commemorating her charitable work, framed photos of her receiving awards, lined the walls. All the evidence of her carefully constructed persona. I crossed to the mahogany desk, heart hammering. My fingers trembled as I slid the bottom drawer open and lifted the false panel. The folder was still there, tucked in the shadows. I pulled it out and laid it on the blotter. The edges were crisp, the label handwritten in my mother's elegant script. Personal, private. I hesitated for just a moment. Then I flipped it open. The first page was a bank statement listing a series of large withdrawals, thousands of dollars at a time. The transactions were recent. My stomach clenched as I realized the dates coincided with the months she'd told me she was tightening the budget. She'd said there was no extra money to help me with my student loans, no room for me to move out. I turned to the next page. A scanned deed. A property I didn't recognize, listed under her maiden name. Why would she keep that hidden? And then, at the very back of the folder, I found a letter. It was printed on heavy cream paper, the kind she always used for her most important correspondence. The salutation read simply, "Dear Robert." Robert, her lawyer. The man who'd been standing beside her all evening, hanging on her every word. I scanned the first lines, my throat closing as I read. "I've done everything you asked. The accounts have been separated as instructed. She'll never suspect anything as long as she believes she's dependent on me." My vision blurred. The letter went on, spelling out a plan to keep me under her thumb, financially, emotionally, every possible way. She hadn't been helping me. She'd been orchestrating my dependence, making sure I had no choice but to stay. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I snapped the folder shut and shoved it back into the drawer. My pulse was a frantic drumbeat in my ears as I replaced the false bottom and closed everything up. I needed air. I slipped back into the hallway and almost collided with Heather. She began, her voice low. I stared at her, searching her face for some sign that she'd known, that she was part of it. But she just looked stricken, her gaze darting nervously toward the ballroom. "Emily, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know she was going to do that tonight." "You didn't know she was going to humiliate me?" My voice came out hoarse. Heather swallowed. "No, not like that. I thought she broke off, twisting her hands together. "You thought she what?" "I thought she wanted everyone to think you were still struggling. But I didn't realize I don't know, Emily. She told me you needed help, that you couldn't handle things on your own. She made it sound like she was protecting you." "Protecting me?" I almost laughed. The sound stuck in my throat. Heather reached for my arm, but I stepped back. I couldn't stand the pity in her eyes. "I have to go," I said. "Emily, wait." But I was already moving, weaving through the guests as if in a dream. My mother was still at the piano, telling some story I couldn't hear over the rush of blood in my ears. Her eyes flicked to mine, a question in them. For the first time, I didn't look away. She tilted her head slightly, studying me as if she were trying to read my mind, as if she could sense the shift, the moment her power over me began to crack. I forced a smile I didn't feel and turned on my heel. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do next, but I knew I couldn't pretend anymore that this was normal. That night, something inside me had changed. I walked back to the patio, the door clicking shut behind me. The cold air bit into my skin, but I hardly felt it. I replayed the words of the letter over and over in my mind. She'll never suspect anything as long as she believes she's dependent on me. A shiver went down my spine. For the first time, I wondered if this had been her plan all along. Not just to humiliate me, but to make sure I never left. Never discovered who I could be without her. I clenched my fists, feeling something dark and resolute settle in my chest. If she wanted to keep me small, she'd miscalculated. I was done playing the dutiful daughter. I was done believing her lies. And whatever it took, I was going to make sure everyone else saw the truth, too. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room with the door locked, staring at the ceiling while shadows crept across the walls. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, that practiced smile hiding the sharpness beneath. Around 3 a.m, I sat up in bed, my chest tight. There was no going back to pretending. No way to force myself into the shape she wanted anymore. I switched on the lamp and pulled my phone from the charger. My thumb hovered over Heather's number. For a moment, I considered calling her, just to hear someone say I wasn't imagining it. But I stopped myself. Heather was part of that world, too, whether she meant to be or not. I needed someone I could trust. Someone who hadn't spent the last decade telling me how fragile I was. I scrolled to the only person who fit that description. David. David Miller had been my friend in college, back when I still believed I could build a life that belonged only to me. We hadn't spoken much in the past few years. Distance, life, my mother's constant criticisms wearing me down, but he was the only person who had ever looked me in the eye and said, "You deserve better than this." I texted him before I could change my mind. "Me, are you awake?" "David, always." "What's wrong?" My throat tightened. I typed out the first explanation that came to me. "Me, I need help. I think my mom has been lying to me about everything." His reply came instantly. "David, where are you?" I hesitated, glancing around the guest room with its soft blue wallpaper and matching drapes. It looked so peaceful, so safe. Like the perfect backdrop for my mother's version of me, a woman too timid to leave, too incompetent to survive alone. Me, her house. "But I'm leaving in the morning." "David, call me when you're in the car." "Whatever you need, I'm here." I set the phone down and pressed my hands over my face. For the first time since I'd read that letter, I felt something close to relief. I wasn't alone. When dawn came, I packed my suitcase with shaking hands. I didn't bother trying to be quiet. If she woke up, let her see me walking out. Let her understand she'd gone too far this time. But the house stayed silent as I rolled my bag down the hallway. I paused outside her bedroom door, listening. Nothing but the soft hush of her breathing inside. Good. I left the house without looking back. In the driveway, I climbed into my battered Honda and pulled out my phone to call David. My hands were damp against the steering wheel. He picked up on the first ring. His voice was a balm I hadn't realized I needed. "I'm leaving," I whispered. I don't know where I'm going yet, but I can't stay here." "You don't have to explain," he said gently. "Do you want to come here? You can stay as long as you need." I closed my eyes. Relief made my whole body feel shaky. "Yes. I'll text you when I'm close." "Good. Drive safe, okay?" "Okay." I hung up and started the car. The drive was a blur, trees whipping past the windows, the early morning light making everything look washed out and unreal. I replayed the letter over and over, the way she'd written it so calmly, like I was nothing more than a problem to be managed. By the time I pulled into David's driveway, I was trembling. He came out to meet me, his hair rumpled, wearing a faded t-shirt and sweatpants. He took one look at me and opened his arms. I let myself fold against him, the dam inside me finally breaking. "It's okay," he murmured into my hair. "You're safe now." But even as he said it, I wasn't sure it was true. Because part of me knew this wasn't over. My mother would come looking for me, if not today, then soon. She'd try to pull me back, spin her story about how ungrateful I was. How she'd only ever tried to help me. I pulled back and wiped my eyes. "I need to show you something. Come in." Inside, I set my bag by the couch and pulled out my phone. I'd snapped a picture of the letter before I put it back. I handed it to him. He read it in silence, his mouth tightening. "She planned it," I said hoarsely. "The whole thing. She made sure I had no money. She told everyone I was unstable. My voice cracked. David looked up, his expression dark. "She wanted you to feel like you couldn't survive without her." I nodded, pressing my hand over my mouth. "Emily." He set the phone down carefully. "You have to understand something. This is abuse. Emotional abuse. Financial abuse. She's been manipulating you your entire life." I swallowed hard. I know. The truth of it was like a bruise under my ribs, sore every time I touched it. David reached over and took my hand. "You're not crazy. And you're not weak." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I drew a shaky breath. "I'm going to expose her." David's eyebrows lifted. "She humiliated me in front of everyone," I whispered. "She's been lying about me for years. If she wants to pretend she's some perfect mother, fine. But she's not going to keep her secrets forever." His gaze searched mine. "What do you have in mind?" "I don't know yet. But I'm going to figure it out." We sat in silence. The morning sunlight spilled across the floor, bright and relentless. She'll never suspect anything as long as she believes she's dependent on me. I clenched my jaw. She thought she'd broken me, that she'd made me so small I'd never stand up to her. But she'd underestimated how much humiliation could change a person. By the afternoon, I had a plan. First, I called Heather. She didn't pick up, but I left a message. Heather, it's Emily.
I know you know more than you said.
I'm giving you one chance to tell me the truth before I go public with what I found. Next, I dug out every document I could remember, old emails, text messages, receipts my mother had helped me file away, evidence of the way she'd controlled my finances. Finally, I drafted an email. Subject: The truth about Meredith Carter. I addressed it to every person on her gala guest list. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the send button. My heart pounded so hard, I felt lightheaded. Once I did this, there was no going back. But maybe that was the point. I thought about the way she'd looked at me last night, so certain I'd never have the courage to stand up to her. I pressed send. The email disappeared into the ether. For a moment, I felt nothing, just a hollow quiet. Then the adrenaline crashed over me all at once. David touched my shoulder. You did it. I nodded, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I don't know what she'll do, I whispered. Whatever it is, he said firmly, she can't touch you anymore. I wanted to believe him. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because exposing her secrets was going to shatter everything, and I didn't know if I was ready for the fallout. But at least, for the first time in my life, the fear wasn't stronger than the truth. And that was something she could never take away from me. I didn't have to wait long for her to respond. The first call came an hour after I sent the email. I let it ring. Then the texts started, one after another, each more frantic than the last. Meredith. Emily, what have you done? Meredith. Call me immediately. Meredith. You are making a huge mistake. I read every message in silence. My heart thudded in my throat, but I refused to reply. By sunset, she was pounding on David's door. He looked at me, question in his eyes. I nodded once. He stepped aside to let her in. She swept into the living room like a storm in pearls and designer heels, her eyes blazing. She didn't look like the woman who'd calmly humiliated me in front of 50 people. She looked cornered. Emily, she hissed. We need to talk. I sat on the sofa, my hands folded in my lap. We are talking. Her gaze flicked to David, standing behind me like a silent witness. She lifted her chin. I'd like a moment alone with my daughter. No, I said evenly. You can say whatever you have to say right here. Her mouth tightened. For a moment, I almost saw the mask slip, the vulnerable part she never let anyone see. But then her expression hardened. You have no idea what you've done, she began, her voice low and trembling with anger. You've embarrassed me. You've destroyed my reputation. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. Her nostrils flared. Those documents were private. You stole them. I discovered them, I corrected. After you spent years making sure I was completely dependent on you. I was protecting you, she snapped. You've never been capable of making responsible decisions. You needed my guidance. Guidance? My voice rose. You mean control. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. You stood in that room and humiliated me, and you thought I'd just stand there and take it. Her eyes glistened. For a moment she looked almost wounded, but then she drew herself up, her voice cold. You've always been ungrateful, Emily. I've sacrificed everything for you. No. My throat felt raw. You sacrificed everything for yourself.
For the image you wanted to project.
And when I didn't fit, you made me small enough to pretend I did. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I took a deep breath. My heart was thundering, but I forced myself to meet her gaze. You don't get to control the story anymore, I whispered. She swallowed hard, her face pale. You think this makes you look strong? You've only proven you're spiteful and unstable. No one will take you seriously. Then why are you here? I asked. Why are you so afraid? Her eyes darted away. For a heartbeat, the room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. Finally, she drew herself up, shoulders stiff. I don't know what you think you've accomplished, But I won't let you ruin everything I've built. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I said. I'm just telling the truth. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. You will regret this. David moved to stand beside me. You need to leave, he said calmly. She looked at him like she'd forgotten he was there. For an instant, her mask slipped entirely, and I saw it, the fear. I don't care what you think you've uncovered, she whispered. You don't understand the full story. Then tell me, I challenged. Her mouth opened, closed again. Her throat worked as she swallowed. Finally, she said, Your father left us with nothing. You were too young to remember. I did what I had to do to keep us afloat. I made choices you'll never understand. My breath caught. So, it was about the money. It was about survival, she spat. You think you're so clever, Emily? You think you're strong? You would have been crushed without me. You still will be. I stared at her, my hands trembling. That's the difference between us, I said softly. You think survival means controlling everyone around you. I think it means finally telling the truth. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't over. I know, I whispered, but it's over for you. For a moment, the two of us just stood there, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. Then she turned on her heel and walked out the door. And just like that, the hold she'd had on me all my life began to break. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a few seconds, I just sat there, feeling the quiet settle over the living room like a fog. My chest ached as though my ribs had been pried open. David didn't say anything. He just sat next to me on the couch, hands resting loosely on his knees. He knew better than to offer platitudes. I closed my eyes, trying to remember how to breathe. She's never going to stop, I whispered. Maybe not, he said. But you don't have to let her. I nodded, though the truth of it hadn't yet sunk in. For 28 years, my entire reality had been shaped by Meredith Carter, her moods, her ambitions, her silent threats. Now, for the first time, there was no script to follow. No part one was required to play. When I finally opened my eyes, David was watching me carefully. What do you want to do now? I don't know, I admitted. I've spent so long reacting to her that I don't even know who I am without it. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That's the part you get to figure out. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Over the next few days, the fallout spread like cracks in glass. I didn't go back to her house. I didn't even pack up the rest of my things. She sent messages, some furious, some pleading, but I ignored them all. On the second day, Heather called. I almost didn't answer. Emily. Her voice was tentative, as though she half expected me to hang up. I'm here, I said. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I closed my eyes, pressing the phone tight against my ear. Did you know? She hesitated. I suspected. She told me things about you. That you were unstable. That you needed her to handle your finances because you couldn't be trusted. I shouldn't have believed her. But you did. I did, she admitted, voice cracking. And I was wrong. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I understand, she whispered. I almost hung up. But then she said something that made my breath catch. Emily, there's something you need to know. She didn't just control you. She's been lying to everyone. About everything. What do you mean? About your father. About the money. About why he left. My heart thudded painfully. You know something? I found letters once, years ago. She told me they were old and didn't matter, but they didn't sound like a man who abandoned you. They sounded like someone she forced out. The room tilted. Do you still have them? I think so, she said. I'll look. After we hung up, I sat there in the quiet, my mind racing. All my life, I'd believed the story she told me, that my father was a selfish man who'd walked away without a backward glance. That she'd sacrificed everything to keep us afloat. But if that was another lie, I pressed my hand to my mouth. I wasn't sure how much more of her deception I could survive. That evening, David found me sitting on the porch, knees pulled to my chest. The sky had turned the color of bruises, the last light fading behind the trees.
Talk to me, he said gently.
I don't know who I am, I whispered. Everything she told me. It might all be a lie. Then you start over, he said. You build your own story. I shook my head. What if I don't have it in me? He sat beside me and looked out at the darkening yard. Then you borrow it from the people who love you until you do. The quiet settled between us again, softer this time. The next morning, Heather sent photos of the letters. I read them one by one, my hands trembling. They were from my father, postmarked months after he'd supposedly left us. He hadn't walked away. He'd been driven out. She'd threatened to destroy him financially. She'd lied to me, told me he never tried to contact me, while all along he had written over and over, I will always love you. I'm sorry I can't be there.
This wasn't my choice.
Tears blurred the words until I couldn't see them anymore. David found me still sitting there, clutching my phone. She took everything, I whispered. Even him.
He didn't try to tell me it would be okay.
He just wrapped his arms around me and let me cry until there was nothing left. By afternoon, the messages from my mother changed. Meredith, Emily, please. Let's talk. Meredith, I never meant to hurt you. Meredith, I did it for you. I stared at the last message for a long time. She would never admit it. Not really. In her mind, she'd always be the martyr, the savior, the woman who'd done the unthinkable to protect me. But I wasn't a child anymore. That evening, I finally answered her call. Her voice was soft.
Emily.
Thank God. I've been so worried. I know the truth, I said flatly. About Dad. About the money. About everything. There was a long pause. I did what I had to do, she said at last. No, I whispered. You did what you wanted to do. Silence. I won't be coming back, I said. And I won't be your secret anymore. Emily. I ended the call. When I looked up, David was watching me from the doorway.
He didn't ask what she'd said.
He just nodded once, as though to say, Good. You're free now. But the strangest part was that freedom didn't feel the way I'd imagined. It wasn't a burst of triumph or relief. It was quiet, raw, like standing at the edge of an ocean I'd never learned to cross. And then, late that night, as I lay in the dark trying to imagine what came next, my phone buzzed with one last message. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. You think you know everything. But you don't know the real reason your father left. My heart jolted. Another lie? Or something even darker than I'd guessed. I sat up, staring at the screen. My pulse thudded in my throat. I started to type a reply but stopped, hands shaking. Whatever truth was waiting on the other side of that message, I knew one thing. This story wasn't over. It might never be. And as the screen went dark in my hand, a single thought whispered through my mind, colder than anything my mother had ever said. Some secrets don't just ruin lives. They define them.